Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe, and do consider supporting the channel via PayPal or Patreon. You'll find the links in the video description. In this video, I'm looking at the Evergreen game between Adolf Anderssen and Jean Dufresne, played in Berlin in 1852. This was a suggestion from one of my patrons, and I'm very happy to look at this game because, well, I don't often dip into the 19th century classics, and it's very interesting to look at these old games with modern eyes. This game, well, along with the Immortal game, also played by Anderssen, were, well, lauded, were praised to the skies in the 19th century and beyond that as well. So let's see whether it lives up to that billing. I have to say, I take a slightly different view on these games, but it's great fun. Let's have a look. So e4, e5. So Adolf Anderssen was really the leading knight in the charge of the Romantic school of chess. So what's the Romantic school of chess? Well, in the 19th century, particularly the mid 19th century, then the whole style, or the epitome of great style, was to play opening gambits, to go for combinations, tactics, sacrifices, if possible to checkmate, with a queen sacrifice. And this was seen as the absolute epitome of chess style. And yeah, Anderssen was at the top, basically. So what do we have here? We have the Evans Gambit. And that is such a typical romantic opening. So white gives up a pawn for, well, let's just say the initiative. Here, bishop e7 is one of the main moves. Bishop a5 is, and that's very reasonable. Bishop a5 has a good reputation as well. d4, and black takes. Now, unfortunately, it's against the rules of chess to recapture with the pawn because of the pin. So white first has to castle. Now, those of you that know your chess history or familiar with Bobby Fischer's 60 Memorable Games will remember that pawn takes pawn was played in a game between Fischer and Fine, a Skittles game in 1963, where Fischer blew away Fine in just 17 moves like this, and the position opened up very quickly and so on. But taking another pawn is just a bit too greedy. Here, Dufresne played d3. The most reliable move here is knight e7, and after pawn takes pawn to strike in the centre with d5. It's not completely clear. After this, white does have a bit of compensation, but black should be fine there. That's certainly the most reliable way to play. You can see that, at least black is developing some pieces. But d3, well, it's also not a bad move if one follows up correctly. Queen b3, attacking the so-called weakest point on the chessboard, f7. Queen f6 defends it. Well, it's okay, but somehow from this point on, you start to worry about black when the queen is coming out at a very early stage, particularly when it can be pushed around like this. e5. Now, if knight takes, rook e1 and pin and win. If d6, you'll notice that bishop is loose, so it's possible to give a check on one of these squares to win the bishop. So after e5, the queen has to move again. See, I'm already a little bit suspicious of black's position. In fact, it's still all right. Knight e7 and bishop a3. And here black plays pawn to b5. I think you know, the most reliable way is to strike in the middle again. And after pawn takes. So the queen defends the pawn here. And on the next turn, black is going to castle. And because black has played d5, then the bishop can enter the game somewhere on one of these squares. Now, black might well lose these pawns, but black is not going to be worse in that situation. And actually, you know, once the bishop comes back here, you know, black's pieces have very stable squares, actually. But b5, that's kind of pushing it a little bit. I mean, I think the idea behind this was to give the bishop on c8 a square here. And in fact, if bishop b7 is played now, well, it's not too bad. Because white wants to develop, but then bishop takes pawn. And black might just about get away with that. But after queen a4, black squandered time and played bishop b6. So now we're in territory where black isn't playing only moves, but with each move it gets harder and harder to actually get a decent position. So knight d2, white is developing fast. And now here, well, you've just got to castle. But after rook e4, it's not so clear. You know, black is pretty tied up here. That's a very beautiful piece on a3, striking across the board. And white is going to play bishop takes pawn on d3. And that rook might swing across here. It's already looking quite dodgy for black, actually. Bishop b7 played, and now things go from bad to worse. Knight e4. I mean, when you have a pawn on e5 that sort of shields white's pieces, so the pawn, then it's beautiful. So the pawn has carved out territory, and white's pieces follow up behind. And here, if black castles, that's the move I want to make on every turn. But by this stage, bishop takes pawn. That queen is in big trouble. It's just not going to find a safe square. Threat knight c5 or knight f6, hitting the queen, and yeah, very difficult to find a good refuge for the queen. So knight e4 just played. So here queen f5 was played, bishop d3, and now the queen shuffled again to h5. I mean, this is just a fantastic position for white. I mean, it's in fact, it's winning already. I mean, perhaps you'd like to have a think. I'll have a slurp of tea. You have a think. That's our usual bargain. So how would you try to prove white's advantage here? How can you press forward? Well, I'm not going to say what's the best way. What would you do here? White to play. Well, I think a very simple way to play is just to chase the queen. You can see it's running short of squares. The queen on a4 stands beautifully, so covering these squares here. So there's only one square, queen h6. Okay, let's hit the queen again with the bishop. Got to go to e6. Okay, we'll hit the queen again. I mean, these are not difficult moves. And if the queen comes here, then there's a nice discovered check. If the queen goes to g6, again, the queen has run out of squares. It's got to come here and then the check. So bishop c4, knight d5. Okay, we'll hit the queen again. Now, we can't take straight away because of the pin. However, just rook e4. And, well, you can see that queen has run very short of squares. Now, those moves are not difficult to find. It's, you know, they're kind of short-range threats, basically. And the queen just gets chased around. It's very, very simple moves. One could also just put a rook in the middle. And actually it's very hard to stop. That's an improved version with rook d1 and knight g3. But I mean, the simplest is just knight g3 here. Just hit the queen and take the material. But now we see the romantic school of chess. Knight f6. I mean, maybe this move is hard to resist, but I don't know. I would resist it. I would just play knight g3 and take the material because it just is so simple. You know, that's practical, prudent chess. This one looks really good, but it's not quite winning. It's still a little bit speculative. And of course, you know, if you get your calculation wrong, then you could just lose. So here comes the counterplay. Rook g8, looking down here. And it sort of, you know, makes sense of that bishop on b7 as well. You know, for me, cutting out counterplay, you know, giving your opponent no chance at all, that's kind of the most sensible, practical way to play. When I look at this, if I were playing white and I'd be thinking, well, before I went in for knight f6, I'd be going, wow, that looks a bit dodgy. I'm not going to risk that. You know, why waste time calculating? But, as I said, this is the romantic school of chess. It's all very glorious. So the rook comes into the middle. Very cool move. And here, black falls for the big trap. Plays queen takes knight. I mean, this has been analysed, and basically rook g4 is the best move here, and black is still fighting. But let's concentrate on the big trap. Queen takes f3. So here's the move. Rook takes knight. Well, in the game, knight takes e7 was played. Well, let's just have a quick look at king d8. Well, here we can play rook takes pawn check. And if king takes, well, something similar happens in the game, but it's basically that ends up with a very picturesque checkmate. Now, for king c8, I won't go through all these variations, but there is one really nice one actually. Rook d8 is the move, and if rook takes, then you can just take the queen. Okay, that's quite prosaic. But if knight takes, okay, what's the move? Careful. There's a checkmate in one threatened here. But how does white win from this position? I'll have another slurp of tea. And you find the move. White to play and win. Well, hopefully it's clear. Queen d7. Bishop f5. And bishop d7. You see, that's the kind of variation that sent the crowds into ecstasy in 1852. They were going mad. In the game, rook takes was played. Knight takes e7. And here again we see queen takes d7. King takes. Bishop f5 check. Double check. If king c6, then bishop d7 is mate. And king e8 was played in the game, and now check. And bishop takes knight, checkmate. So, yeah, this absolutely dazzled the public, and this game became known as the Evergreen game. And it's very nice. However, there's going to be a however from me. Black played so badly. And I have to say that I think that was well deserved. He got what was coming, basically. You know, if you play moves, if you loiter with your king in the middle, if you bring your queen out early, then you're already tempting fate. Not that this is terrible for black, but it's the combination of hanging around with your queen and then kind of pushing it with moves like b5 and after that still messing around with bishop b6. You know, black has to play energetically. You have to try to get your king out as quickly as possible. And yeah, black just disobeyed too many rules here. And it just looks to me like Anderssen was having fun in this position. And his opponent was simply much, much weaker. So for me, that somewhat spoils the game. And, you know, frankly, you know, when I see one of Kasparov's combinations, for example, then they have so much more depth than this. Or, you know, I see a beautiful positional squeeze by Carlsen. Then again, that for me, that has more depth. But it's all a question of taste. Let me know what you think. The Evergreen game, is it still evergreen, or are those leaves somewhat tarnished? I look forward to hearing from you. And then I'm going to show you another game from the 19th century, because I don't want to sort of leave this one on its own. I'm going to show you a game between Anderssen and Morphy. And then we see two schools of chess clashing. Thanks for watching.